Good morning and welcome to the Fusion Antibodies PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to CEO, Dr. Adrian Kincaid. Good morning, sir.
Thank you very much, Lily. Thank you, everybody, for your time and joining us today to go through the results for financial year ended 31st of March 2023. I'm joined today by Stephen Smith, who is new to the team. I'll invite Stephen to do a quick introduction. Would you like to do that now, Stephen?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Adrian, and good morning, everyone. Yes, my name is Stephen Smith. I'm a partner in an Irish chartered accountants firm and have been recently appointed as the CFO of Fusion Antibodies. Have been working with the firm for a little over a month, so I'm happy to be here today. Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks, Stephen. So without much further ado, I will walk you through the presentation and hand over to Stephen for the financial sections, but otherwise it's me. So first of all, we need to draw attention to the disclaimer in the usual way, which I'm going to take as having been read, and then walk you through the agenda. So we'll cover some introductions and some highlights. Stephen will take you through the financial performance. I'll give you a once-late update on the R&D platform. And also then take you through the sort of strategic focus that the business is focused on, and then a summary of the presentation as well. So just a reminder, because I'm very aware that we have quite a few new investors. Fusion Antibodies is an antibody engineering company at heart, but we cover everything from discovery right the way through what we might call engineering and modifying the sequences of the antibodies that we find, and through to supply. So supply exists in the format of generation of batches of antibodies for research purposes. They're not for putting into people. It's for research purposes, for testing those antibodies in cellular models, tissue models, or indeed potentially animal models, but not to go into humans. We can then take the selected antibody sequence and generate what's known as a stable cell line, which can then be passed on to a GMP manufacturer, a GMO manufacturer, and they will produce quantities that are certified and suited for clinical trials. So we don't do that part of the manufacture ourselves, but we can take you right up to the end point there. Now, if you focus really at the early start in terms of the discovery stage, some of our eagle-eyed and persistent attendees in this meeting will notice that we've extended the range of the discovery tools that are available to us. And this has been a real focus for the business in the last year or so. So the additions that we have on here are what we call AIM Lab. I will go into that in a little bit more detail towards the end, but also mammalian display, which is another output from the Optimal program. And again, I'll update you on those. So we're extending the front end of the discovery. And that's really important to the business because we want to cover or keep clients through as much of the process of services that we offer. We put those together in what we call the Integrated Therapeutic Antibody Service, which was an initiative from pretty much last year, as soon as I joined, which has been well received and enables us to keep clients right the way through, from discovery through engineering and into supply, potentially right up to the stable cell line development. So that's important for us. We work with a range of different companies, organizations, from drug discoverers, whether they're biotechs or even virtual companies, through to large pharmaceutical companies. Now, you may wonder why a large pharmaceutical company would want to outsource work to Fusion, and that's a very fair question to put. Really, we need to have some significant USPs, unique selling points, to attract that kind of business from those larger organizations. And that's what those new discovery engines do for us, which we've not really had in the past. Anybody who's efficient and proficient in the process and the science would be able to do hybridoma work or B-cell cloning. It's skilled, it is difficult, it is challenging. A lot of people can't get it quite right, but we do. But in addition to that, we now have proprietary platforms for discovery that we can get in at the front end, and it's a lot more attractive to those larger organizations who would otherwise do the work potentially in-house. So that's one of the reasons in terms of the commercial aspirations of the business and where we're at as to why we've been pushing ahead both with the Integrated Therapeutic Antibody Service, ITAS, and those discovery engines that we've described. So what we then do for all of our customers is really accelerate their journey to the clinic. So our mission is to get the best antibodies into the clinic more rapidly, and that's the focus of every component of the parts that we do for our clients. So we've extended the offering now to include that AIM Lab, AI, ML a component in the discovery part, and that is an integral part of the ITAS offering as a whole. So those two additional capabilities have been added to this slide, but we still have, of course, a team of internationally respected scientists, a lot of experience. We've done well over 250 different antibody projects now. There's probably not a problem that you could experience with an antibody that some of our clients haven't already brought to us in one form or another. And building on that expertise is something that the company has built a tremendous reputation on in its existence. So that knowledge base has been increasing the whole time. The comprehensive portfolio of antibody services makes us more and more attractive to clients and bringing those things through. And of course, we are focused, as I said, in terms of the mission, in an efficient and integrated approach. So moving on to the year at hand, or the year that's just ended, some operational high points, or indeed low points. We introduced the ITAS service just about as soon as I was in post. I joined the company in August 2022, which does mean that the company was without a CEO for some 5 months of the year. We continued with the successful progression of Optimal, which has been tremendously challenging, but it is one of the most complicated things in antibody discovery that mankind has really attempted to do. And we can't underestimate the value that we've achieved with Optimal and what it can do in this platform. It really is a very strong USP. There have been, because of market conditions in particular, a number of projects that have been delayed by their clients, mainly due to their financial constraints. So we were in a position where, certainly as I inherited the company or took over, the vast majority of our client base was VC-funded biotechs, and they had a tough time. Money was getting more and more difficult to obtain. They were therefore slowing things down, only progressing things when they needed to and they had to. And that's had a knock-on effect on our business. It is fair to say that we are addressing that issue in terms of diversifying our client base. And one of the reasons why I started this presentation by explaining the benefits of AIM Lab in particular, but the other discovery engines that we're bringing on as part of our integrated therapeutic antibody service approach. The revenues for the business is worth reminding you that we are a global business. We had 77% of our revenues this year from outside of the UK. And encouragingly for me, 50% of those now is from North America. So an increasing percentage of penetration into North America, which is our single biggest market for biotech antibody development. The revenues were 2.9, so dropping down from 4.8 last year, which included some milestones. Expenditure on R&D did increase by about £100,000. Overall, we made a loss of 2.6, which is significantly up on the previous year, and the cash position at the end of the year was low, just under £200,000, which necessitated a fundraise, which we have completed. We raised 1.67 million before cost. We have also significantly reduced the cost base, making overall 2.2 million of savings in this current financial year. So 1.6 of annualized savings and a further 600,000-ish of additional savings. The plan that we are now working to takes us to profitability. We've also appointed Stephen, as we mentioned at the start. So we have a new CFO, new financial team in place behind Stephen as well. But more importantly, I think in terms of moving the business forward, we also have new revenue stream opportunities created, things like AIM Lab, and I'll expand on that towards the end of the presentation. And significantly, the pipeline in our CRM and our customer relationship management database is now some 3 times stronger than it was at the end of the financial year. So things do seem to be picking up, and the future is looking rather positive, much more so than it has been. So I will pass over to Stephen to take you through the financial pages.
Thanks, Adrian. Okay, so our historical revenues, as we can see from this slide, after several consecutive years of revenue growth, fiscal 23 was a challenging year for Fusion Antibodies, which is reflected in a revenue decline of 39.5% from the prior year. When we remove £300,000 of milestone payments that were received in fiscal 22, the like-for-like decline in revenue in 23 was 35.5%. I think it's fair to say that revenue generation challenges faced by the company through fiscal 23 were, as Adrian has already alluded to, were primarily twofold. For the first 5 months of the year, Fusion did not have a CEO in place to drive the commercial direction of the company. This issue was addressed in late August 22 through Adrian's appointment. However, given the timeline involved between developing and ultimately monetizing a pipeline of business, it is our view that this period without a CEO has negatively impacted most of fiscal 23. The second contributing factor in the decline of year-over-year revenue was, again, the significant fall in demand from the company's primary client base, venture capital funded biotechs, in what was, and to a large extent continues to be, a period of economic uncertainty fueled by high inflation, rising costs of capital. Funding availability had dried up for a lot of our clients, and projects were ultimately being delayed at many of Fusion's customers. Despite seeing anecdotal evidence of these funding pressures easing in our core client base, Fusion has, through the development of a new suite of services, created what we believe to be unique selling points that will enable the company to target and service the more established market players, which we believe will result in larger projects, while at the same time diversifying our underlying client base. Our income statement extract year over year, as we've seen in the highlights section, revenue dropped 39.5% on a gross basis from 4.8 million to 2.9. The gross profit to 574 from just over 2.4 million, resulting in a significantly shrinking margin from 51% to 20%. That was due to significant fixed costs, salary-based costs, which have been addressed in, as Adrian mentioned, early in the fiscal 24 year. So we've pulled out 1.6 million of of run rate on a year-over-year basis. So margin, we're expecting to rebound significantly in the year ahead. Our balance sheet for the year, a summary of financial position, fixed assets or non-current assets down from 633 to 375. That included £114,000 of equipment additions in the year and £372,000 of amortization. Not a great movement in our inventories. Our receivables are down from 1.65 million to 953,000. Of that 953, 690 are trade receivables, net of a 150,000 loss allowance provision, and we have 263 in tax receivables. As Adrian alluded to, at the end of the year, cash was just under 200,000. That was prior to the 1.7 million raise pre-costs. Our current payables are also lower than last year. They're predominantly made up of trade payables, lease liabilities, and hire purchase liabilities. Equity in the company, or the valuation of equity in the company, has fallen from 3.6 million to 1.1. Our cash flows, cash burned in operations for the business in the prior financial year was just over 1.7 million. Investing activities were the capital asset additions that I referred to in the previous slide. So movement in cash in the period, a fall from just over 2 million to the 195. And again, post-year, a fundraise of 1.5 net of costs. Adrian, I'll hand it back to you for the R&D platform.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. So I promised you an update on the R&D. Many people are interested in Fusion primarily because of what its potential is in terms of the Optimal platform. So the central to the Optimal platform are two component parts. One is the library of potential sequences, or sequences that make and encode for antibodies, so DNA sequences for antibodies. Those sequences are for fully intact human antibodies, which in the vast majority of cases is the end point that what people want to screen for. So if you start with the end in mind, it makes tremendous sense to go looking for fully intact human antibodies. Most people at the moment do not do that. They do not have the platform to enable that to happen. And that's why Optimal is such a potential groundbreaker and a game changer for the industry. So where are we with it? So we've got the mammalian display element launched. It's just a question of doing it at scale that we want to do. At the moment, the target for the scale, to put it into context, is creating a library of around 10 to the 9, so 1 billion different sequences at any one go. We routinely run, it's a lot of work to do that, so we routinely run for our research processes and development processes just 1% of that. So that's still 10 million sequences in our smaller working libraries or R&D libraries. And from those, we've been able to pull out control antibodies. So we plant a sequence in there, which we know will work for the target that we use, and we can pull it out from 10 million. So effectively, the process works. It's a question of getting it to the right scale. So how well does it work, and can I provide you evidence of it working? I'll do a little bit of a dive into tech here. On the slide, you can see 4 different images. Image A has a stain for the nucleus of the cells in question. So we're imaging individual cells here. So that blue stain shows us where the start of the heart, the nucleus of the cell is. The green stain shows a green fluorescent protein, which is being expressed within the cells, and that shows the cytoplasm and the membrane. That's linked to the antibody that we've introduced to that cell. So first of all, we're looking for green, and then we're going to see whether the antibody is available and is expressed on the cell surface. And that's what stain C gives you in the red staining. That is human antibodies expressed on the surface of the cells at pretty high concentrations, doing exactly what it is that we want Optimel to deliver. Image D is an overlay of those. Now, some of you will have noticed that some cells, in other words, blue spots that we can see there, are not accompanied by a display of antibody. And that is exactly in line with what we want from this platform. We load and infect the cells with the DNA that we're interested in. We're trying to get one antibody per cell for the majority of cells. And in doing that, we intentionally mean to leave a number of cells empty and not expressing. So again, this result just underlies and points out that the platform is working extremely well in that format. It's the scale that we need to address and working that up. So that's really where we are in this stage. Now, we are somewhat less, after the restructuring, somewhat less capable, fewer resources for R&D available to us. So we are looking outwardly to get earlier collaborations underway to really test Optimel at scale and with third-party validation. And I'm pleased to say that there is a research collaboration under discussion. So it's not signed at this date, but it's under discussion to trial Optimel in such a way for a number of cancer targets. So we will update everybody at the appropriate time when there's something material there. But at this stage, it's an early indication, and it shows that we're managing to progress Optimel with the resources that we have available, and doing so in a very successful way, we hope. I'll now move on to more strategic focus for the business going forward. So the main things that we've been working on and continue to work on are the rollout of the discovery engine. So what we can do at the front end of our process or offerings to the client, and how we can then have that as an integrated part of a single process that leaves the business with Fusion right the way through development or engineering and supply of antibodies, potentially right the way to the cell line development stage. Now, mammalian display, as I just explained with that those different images, is ready, and we've got that available, albeit at a relatively small scale. That relatively small scale is an ideal match to the algorithms that come out from AI, ML approaches and design of antibodies. And I've got another slide on that, so I'll go into that in a bit more detail momentarily. But the AIM-Lab process for that is one of the discovery engines that we've identified that fits with Fusion. It is unique to Fusion, combination of what we offer clients, and positions us with a very hot topic to go forward. Optimel, as I explained earlier, is also entering beta testing or discovery research agreement to beta test that with a third party. And then we've also discussed using those sequences, but putting them into the more industry standard phage display format. So that may seem like a bit of a retrograde step, but the design of our library is sufficiently elegant and advanced that it would give us a distinct advantage even in a phage format, where we are looking for panning for fragments. Now, why would we do that? Well, in some cases, some clients do actually want fragments for various reasons, so it makes a lot of sense. But also offering phage is something that can attract some initial inquiries from people that we could then upsell to the more advanced methods if they are appropriate for the client. But what we're building up is a range of discovery engines, a range of tools for antibody discovery, which makes us puts us in an enviable position to really service this market better than anybody else. We're continuing to seek out new commercial partnerships, and other commercial alliances. Indeed, that's the approach that we're taking for the AI/ML approach, where there's a lot of development going on from a lot of specialist organizations. We will expand and reach out to new client base, so those bigger organizations, big pharma even, that I talked about earlier, and now in our target sites, and then generate additional revenues with those. We are still servicing the VC-funded smaller entities, but we're looking to add additional revenues from different sectors to do that. And AIM-Lab is a good way of achieving that penetration. In addition to the discovery ways that we are approaching things and increasing what we offer, we're also finding applications in other markets. So I'm pleased to say that we've had tremendous interest, or significant interest, in veterinary medicine. So animals also get sick. Those illnesses can be treated using antibodies. My own dog has had a therapeutic antibody injection which worked an absolute treat. So the veterinary medicine market is growing, expanding, and it's a relevant marketplace for us. Fusion made a lot of its name in the original, several years ago, in original format for humanization of antibodies, which is a challenging technique. This is where you take a mouse or rabbit antibody typically, and then convert it so that it matches the human genome and looks very much like a human antibody, and therefore doesn't get rejected by the patient or cause an immune response from the patient. The same thing is required for veterinary medicine, but instead of humanizing, we're making them compatible with dogs or cats as companion animals as the main economic targets. So we call those processes caninization and felinization, and we're doing those processes for our veterinary medicine clients following the same techniques or parallel techniques to those that we've already established and achieved extremely successfully with humanization. Antibodies, as we all know now, having come through the pandemic, are also used very widely in diagnostics. And the diagnostics market is enjoying something of an uplift, because the expectation as to getting diagnosis done more rapidly and earlier is, as a result, I believe, the pandemic is highlighted, and therefore there is more funding going into diagnostics, and that sector is doing well. We also service that sector. We can generate antibodies for diagnostics purposes, and we're redoubling efforts to bring those clients to us as well. The changes in the way that antibodies are developed and the timelines and the throughputs and the techniques that we have also mean that research antibodies, which have sometimes been considered something of a poor cousin to the high value therapeutics, are actually now becoming much more accessible and more reasonable to work on. So we are seeing an uplift also from the research antibody sector as well, an uplift in interest at least. So it'll be an interesting area to keep an eye on. So AIM-Lab in a little bit more detail. I know I talk about this quite a lot, but it is really exciting. The AI, artificial intelligence world is definitely a hot topic. The machine learning element is one version of artificial intelligence that gets you there. And the algorithms that we're interested in are those which are used to design novel antibodies. Typically, they will be paired with an algorithm that predicts the sequence of the target. They can run extremely rapidly and go through huge numbers of potential theoretical sequences, which of course you don't have to create. They're just created in silico and on the computer. And because everything is on the computer, there's no antigen actually required to get to start projects. So that sort of lag and delay is reduced. Now, the AI/ML algorithms that are out there and currently being offered the typical sort of output from those is considered to be hundreds, maybe thousands of sequences. And economically speaking, it makes sense only to synthesize hundreds of sequences, express those proteins and test them, so that we're looking at hundreds of antibodies. And that's what Fusion does for our AI/ML partners and clients. We take those hundreds of sequences and generate a relatively small number of those, so hundreds of antibodies, test them and see which ones are actually the best. There is some level of risk with any new project and any new approach to drug discovery, and that still carries through, even though it's AI/ML that's doing it, possibly even more so. So any scientist worth their salt will be looking to de-risk the project in any way, shape or form. And what we can do with our mammalian display is offer a route to totally de-risking that, or very comprehensively de-risking that project, so that we can take the thousands of sequences that are output, we can combine the different mutations that are suggested in those sequences and make an even more complex and more wide-ranging library of sequences, and that could then expand that library to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million sequences, which sounds like a big challenge. But for our Optimal platform, or rather our mammalian display part, it's essentially a walk in the park. So we have the ability to put those sequences, which are human sequences, into a mammalian cell to express the whole intact IgG molecule and select the best ones from that. So as a safety net, as a follow-on, if that first 100 or so sequences, or maybe 1,000 sequences, doesn't contain the hit that you need, that meets all the criteria that the scientists and therapeutic area teams are looking for, we can delve deeper and we de-risk the program for the client. No one else offers that. We have commercial agreements in place, sorry about the typo, with a US-based specialist organization at the moment. We have additional AI/ML partners that we're working to add to that portfolio. It's important, I think, for us to build up a panel of AI/ML partners to work with, because the algorithms that they have are not a panacea. They have strengths and weaknesses, and combining those different options means that for a given target, for a given client and their needs, we can pull out the best solution for it. A little bit like an insurance broker has many underwriters, so Fusion can work with many AI/ML partners. The commercial traction for this is particularly satisfying because we've already received an order. We got the contract or the agreement in place with our partner, and within as little as 8 days, we had a purchase order. 8 days from the first contact with the client. So there's a pent-up demand for what we can offer and what we can bring. And I think it's a really hot topic. And there are tremendous parallels between this and computer-aided drug design for small molecules, which was brought about some 20 years ago. It's a very similar process, and what we're offering has parallels with what worked very successfully for drug discovery then, and there's no reason why it won't work successfully for drug discovery today as well. Additional partners, as I mentioned, being identified so to expand that range of algorithms. Our role in it is to provide the essential real-world wet lab expertise, which builds on experience that we have, where we're recognized by our clients as being world-class in that regard. So it's great to sort of build on and have another extension to what we're extremely good at. And it also feeds, as I've said before, into the complementary capabilities of part of ITAS, going right the way through from the beginning to the end of the process. So I have a slide here just updating on the various discovery engines. I pointed out the highlights from these as we've worked through, but the message for this slide is really that we have a comprehensive suite of engines either available now or in the pipeline coming through that we can bring to bear for any of our clients' targets. And I don't think there's many companies out there that can compete with this kind of toolbox that we have. And with a comprehensive toolbox is surety that the right tool is used for the job. So on that point, I'll just summarize, if I may, to admit and recognize that the financial year that we're reporting on, 2023, was very challenging. It was difficult for the entire industry. We were not immune to that. We were somewhat more exposed to the VC funding issues than we would have liked, and we're working to address that. We have necessitated a significant cost reduction exercise, which is complete. We have all of the we've taken all of the measures that we needed to take to match our expected revenues and the resources that we have available. Painful process, but needed to be done, and we're not immune from that. Lots of our clients had to go through the same sort of thing. New platforms commercially launched, so as the market picks up, we are in the position to exploit these new developments, and the market will pick up. It always does. Our clients have gone through the same sort of painful restructuring processes. When their brakes come off, they want to move as quickly as possible, and their tendency is that they will outsource more of their work than they would have done before, because that internal resource has moved on. So multiple discovery engines to bring to the market, have on the market, and just a reminder that the antibody markets remain highly valuable, and Fusion is increasing our penetration of those markets. The pipeline now is some 3 times stronger than it was at the end of the financial year. Quick answer to one of the questions that came through. That is 3 times stronger, both in terms of value and in terms of opportunities in that pipeline. The pipeline does include opportunities now in adjacent markets, which is much more stabilizing for the business. It does include opportunities in ITAS and AIM Lab and VetMed, as I mentioned before, as well. So with that, I will conclude, and just with a little graphic that's updated to emphasize that we are a global business. We have significant collaborations going on pretty much wherever drug discovery, diagnostics are undertaken, and we're looking to build on this going forward. With that, I'll draw a close, and I think we will be able to get through some questions in a moment.
Adrian, Stephen, thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. Just while the company take a few moments to review those questions submitted today, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via our investor dashboard. As you can see, we've received a number of questions throughout today's presentation. Could I please ask you to read out the questions and give responses where appropriate to do so, and I'll pick up from you at the end.
Okay, thank you. We have one pre-submitted question, and I think another question during the presentation on the company's need to raise additional finance before the next fiscal year end. I can take that one. At the time of the last fundraise in May, the company stated that we anticipated that those proceeds would provide sufficient working capital for 18 months. That does remain the company's view. A key focus during that period will be to achieve monthly cash neutrality, so that we are not actually required to raise additional funds for working capital even after the 18-month period. We are treating the recently raised funds as a precious commodity. There is no doubt about that. Whether or not we ultimately need to raise funds will largely depend on new business returning in line with our expectations. As indicated in the presentation, early signs are very positive, with a 3-fold increase in the order book since year end. Adrian, if you want to have a look at some of the other questions.
Yeah, so I'll work through the submitted ones and pre-submitted ones first. So one question was, what has happened with the collaboration with Eurofins? So I can just update that the collaboration has been extended and continues to provide both parties with good leads, qualified leads, and complementary services so that both parties can offer those. Eurofins is also very helpful in us getting an inside track on how they see the markets as well, so that we can sanity check some of our ideas. So it's more useful even than just the lead generation components, although that is the main reason for having it. Next question, one directed at me. It appears as if Adrian has been appointed to a new investment board promoting links with the USA. Should the company not release this sort of information to the market? Yeah, I saw that. We are aware of the investment board in question and believe that there is significant potential for it to benefit the region, Northern Ireland in particular. I would also say that being aware of that, I also believe that the representation from Northern Ireland is strong and it's appropriate. However, you shouldn't believe everything that you read on the internet. There is nothing to report regarding myself and that panel. So moving on, next question was, there's been no release of commercials on the AIM-Lab service. What impact is this individual contract likely to have on the bottom line? So we don't disclose commercial details for individual contracts. This would provide very valuable information to our competitors, which we wouldn't want them to have. The financial details are confidential as much as we can keep them. The AIM-Lab service as a whole, though, has great potential for several reasons. It opens up the AI/ML antibody design space, specialist space to Fusion and our clients. And with all AI/ML these days, that is a very hot topic. Lots of scientists are wanting to see what it can do for their projects. And really, it was that the speed at which the first order was placed is evidence for. It also differentiates us. It generates new leads at the front end of the range of services that we offer as well, so that it positions starting projects so that we can take them through, we can create more value for our clients, and we can extract more value for our bottom line as well. So I'm confident that AIM-Lab as a whole has the potential to be very significant driver of considerable growth for the company. And it will be a combination of different contracts that leads to that. Another question pre-submitted is, what is the morale of staff like? Is there an increased risk of failure due to the departure of key staff now? A very good question. No groups of staff enjoy a restructuring process. It's painful. So inevitably, morale has taken a hit. However, the process was carefully managed to retain the skill sets that are required to service each and every one of our individual offerings. So we have that coverage. There is no impact on the actual services that we can offer. Furthermore, the staff have been engaged and responded extremely well in an extensive cross-training exercise, which positions the business with a much more flexible and dynamic team, enables us to respond to demand where and when it occurs. So we're better off in that regard than you might think. Furthermore, the cross-training has also trained the trainers, as they say, so that they are also well placed with processes and courses, as it were, internal courses, to rapidly train new recruits when we take them on board, when they're needed, when the business requires that. So I'll just turn to some of the other questions. Can you say anything about the value of the sales pipeline currently and how this has changed in the past few months? We did say that it's some 3 times stronger than it was before. That is in line with our activities as well. So we still see that when we go out on the road and we do conferences and push for new do new initiatives, we do see a knock-on effect, and we see the pipeline increasing. Inevitably, there is some attrition that happens with some of those projects and opportunities. Not everything works through. That sort of success rate doesn't seem to have deteriorated, or rather it's recovered to where it was before. So we're more comfortable about making forecasts, and it's strong, much stronger than it was, and strengthening. Another question was, could you comment on how the strategy of partnering with AI companies is going? Is the second memorandum of understanding, I think that means, still progressing towards an executed contract? Any new contacts possible or likely? So yes, when we announced first of all that we had a memoranda of understanding with 2 organizations, the second one was a European-based one. We are still progressing that. That company is not as well developed as the US one. So at the appropriate time, we're looking forward to moving that one forward. When we did announce the AI ML or AIM Lab service was live, it also stimulated some interest from AI ML companies as well. So I think things are picking up, and we will gather momentum in that space. So new contracts are in discussion. They're in the pipeline, as I just mentioned. I think we answered that one already. So question here on, given how important revenue generation will be in the second half of this financial year that we're in now, in other words, now to March next year, will you be able to provide more frequent updates on this to the marketplace? We can't comment on individual projects and individual projects that come through to us, contracts. But we will give indications of how things are progressing, where they are significant. And as we get busier, I suspect that will mean additional updates to the marketplace.
Yeah, I think I could probably add to that, Adrian, that currently the company expects to hit analyst expectations. If there is a significant deviation from that, we will release an RNS update as soon as that information becomes available.
So another question was, is there a greater weighting of big pharma in the pipeline uplift, or is this still reflective of the previous model? I'm going to answer the slightly different question and talk about big companies rather than necessarily pharma. So there is a little bit of a shift towards bigger companies, which I think is really redressing. So it's more appropriate representation of company size across the marketplaces that we're servicing. I'm very mindful that larger organizations, in very generic terms, have a tendency to work slightly more slowly than some of the more dynamic, agile, smaller biotech companies. So I think we are going to see some of that coming through, but is it fully responsible for the 3 times uplift? No, that's really business across the board is improving. So it's not weighted on one big element within that at all. There are larger organizations that are engaging with us. Some of those will include big pharma, and I think that's going to take some time to really work through. So it's just starting at this stage. Stephen, have you got another one to answer at this stage?
I don't think so. I think as far as the questions primarily focused on the need for a fundraise and around the pipeline. So I think we've probably covered what we need to cover.
Adrian,
Okay.
Stephen, thank you for your presentation. I think you've addressed all those questions you can from investors, and of course the company can review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. Before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, Adrian, can I please just ask you for a few closing comments?
I'd like to thank everybody again for their time and attention today. It is important to us, and we do want to get information out to shareholders. We're very grateful for your support. I think it's only fair to say that it's been a very difficult year. The consensus, not just within Fusion, but across the industry in the context that I have, that the situation is improving. As that landscape improves, Fusion now has the differentiation that it was craving in previous years, or I think it needed in previous years before my involvement, to gain more connections, more openings, opportunities at early points in, so that discovery part of our clients' processes, and create more value and also extract more value from those projects. Antibodies have never been in more demand than they are now. The developments that we've all been aware of for neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's in particular, highlights that exceptionally well. A whole therapeutic area that previously we didn't know that antibodies would be able to address. It is addressing. Antibodies remain the leading component for therapeutics, including outstripping small molecules in terms of the numbers and top 10 bestsellers, etc. So the future is very bright. It's an exciting time for Fusion. We're determined to make it successful. And so far as AI/ML goes, the future is now. It's available, and you come to Fusion for it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Adrian, Stephen, thank you for updating investors today. Can I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, and I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Fusion Antibodies PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. Good afternoon to you all.